Welcome to Fireside Chats with Erin. I'm Erin Gowriluk, the president of the Canada Grains Council and your host. This podcast serves as a platform to explore grain sector priorities that reflect the Council's work here at home and around the world. And together we will discuss issues and ideas with policymakers and industry influencers. And today I am joined by Elli Tsiforou. Elli has served as the Secretary General of COPA-COGECA since September of this year. She is an expert in agricultural policy with over 20 years of experience advocating for the Greek and EU agricultural sector. She has served for 5 years on the board of directors at Gaia Pihirin, first as the Director General and later as CEO, overseeing the organization's strategy, policy, and communication initiatives. Her experience includes a decade of involvement with COPA and COGECA as the representative of the Greek member organizations leading EU-level advocacy actions on agricultural policy and digital transformation of the sector. As chairwoman of the Cooperative Coordination Committee of COGECA from 2020 to 2024, she played a crucial role in promoting the cooperative model and facilitating discussions among EU agricultural cooperatives. Elli holds a degree in communication and media from Greece and France and has served in several high-profile roles, including as policy advisor at the European and Hellenic parliaments and head of cabinet to the Greek Minister of Culture and Tourism. She is fluent in Greek, English, French, and Italian. Elli, thank you very much for stopping by for a fireside chat.
A pleasure and an honor to be your guest, Erin.
Likewise, you can correct any of the pronunciations there that I didn't quite capture.
It was perfect.
Okay, close enough.
Very close.
We'll go with that. Well, welcome to the show, Elli. It is such a pleasure to connect with you and to learn more about you and the organization that you now represent. Europe is an important region for Canadians and for the Canadian grain industry for a couple of reasons. It's an important market for many Canadian ag exports, and domestic policies in the EU have an impact on our ability to access that market. But it's also an important region because of its global influence. And many of our listeners have heard me say this before. The impact that it can have in multilateral forums like the WTO are sizable. Yeah, they're important. And so we spend a lot of time looking at the evolution and the direction of EU ag policy. So before we get into what I think is going to be a pretty rich policy discussion, given your background in this space, tell our listeners a bit about COPA-COGECA, who you represent, and give us a brief introduction to some of your policy and advocacy priorities.
Thank you for starting with this question, Erin, because COPA and COGECA are historical EU-based organizations. They represent together the voice of European farmers and agri-cooperatives. So COPA was established in 1958, so 1 year after the Treaty of Rome establishing the European Union. And in 59, 1 year after that, COGECA was established. And since 1962, the two organizations that have their separate, let's say, objectives, but they share most of them, decided to work together. And the secretariat that I have the honor to lead today is here to support and to guide and to facilitate their work. So COPA and COGECA have been accompanying the EU work unfolding in the last decades since the beginning, constructively contributing with our ideas in building what we have been able to build so far together. And today, they represent national organizations from the farmer side and from the cooperative side, from all across the 27 member states of the EU. So we are talking about millions of farmers and more than 23,000 agricultural cooperatives. There is no such big representative organization in the farming sector in the EU. I need to say also that we work in a very inclusive, bottom-up and democratic way. So we work at 3 levels. We start with our working parties, more than 40 working parties that are operational now within our structures, bringing the expertise of our members on various topics, either the commodities or the more transversal horizontal topics. Then a level of coordination so that everything that is produced within the working parties is coherent and makes sense until it reaches the upper level, the decision-making level, which is our presidia, our leadership plenaries that take place every 2 months to take decisions on all topics that have an impact on our sector. So advocacy work on agricultural policy and any policy that has an impact on agriculture. And nowadays, we see bits and pieces of agriculture in different portfolios of the European Commission. So environment, climate, energy, growth, so competitiveness. So agriculture is everywhere. And we are here to make sure that the voice of the farming community is listened by the European institutions.
That is remarkable to get some insight into the inner workings in terms of how policy development is done and how you have so many different regions under your purview, but have established these really unique and complex, I would imagine, forums through which to sort of develop consensus together with all of your various member partners. So Elli, there seems to be this ever-evolving discussion in the EU regarding agriculture policy. I mean, you talked about the fact that agriculture touches everything. You know, the Commission's Farm to Fork strategy was originally hailed as a highly ambitious initiative that would transform European agriculture. I'm not sure if all European farmers agreed with that sentiment. Since then, we've seen the strategic dialogue on the future of EU agriculture. And now earlier this year, the Commission published its vision for agriculture and food. So can you provide us with a bit of an overview as to how the Commission's policy direction has evolved over the last 5 years and what aspects of those policies have changed between the original Farm to Fork strategy and now what you're working with as it relates to the vision for EU agriculture and food?
It's, well, you have put the context quite very well, Erin. I mean, we come from a mandate of the European Commission and the institutions work where the Green Deal was the overarching priority, the top priority, the umbrella for all the policy initiatives coming from the European Commission. These last 5 years have been quite tough for our community. And why is that? You know, we come across in the EU-based media as opposing the Green Deal objectives. It was not the case. I mean, we were not objecting the objectives. We were objecting the way the Green Deal was proposed, or if I may say, imposed to us. So what we saw in the previous term was very strict regulation, concrete targets that we had to reach as a farming sector, but without any previous proper consultation, without impact assessments, and for us expected to deliver on the objectives without talking on the right method to do it, and on the support tools and the toolbox that we needed in order to engage in the path towards the sustainable transition. I think there was, you know, sustainability has 3 pillars, the economic, the environmental, and the social one. And in the previous term, the environmental prevailed, overshadowing the other 2 pillars, and especially the economic one. So this was the issue that we faced, and it was quite unfair because even before the previous 5-year term, our community in the EU has been consistently investing in new approaches, in innovation, in order to become more sustainable, but in a balanced way, taking into consideration all the pillars of sustainability. So no recognition either on the efforts that were already made and building on those efforts and on those good practices, and having the farming community embracing the objectives and being supported in order to deliver. So this was not the case. At the end of the last mandate, and I think that the farmers' protests all across the EU member states at the beginning of 2024 were quite helpful from this point of view of conveying this strong message of discontent, of lack of understanding on behalf of the farming community of what was the direction the EU take, and if they still needed us to produce, to stay in the core essence of our profession. So this was a very strong message that was raised during the protests. The Commission listened to us, and at the end of the mandate, there was a shift in how they perceived us. So since September 2023, the President of the Commission lent a hand. She said that we need dialogue with the sector, and this was the moment where the idea of the strategic dialogue was born, if I may say so. So in the start of this new term, we see that our sector is recognized for its strategic importance. We see the economic pillar of sustainability also gaining back the spotlight. Competitiveness is a key priority. This doesn't mean that the environmental part has been taken out. But this balanced way of viewing things is back on the agenda, and we are very happy about it. So the vision for the future of EU agriculture that has been published in mid-February is a very positive document. Already the language, I mean, we see there farmers being recognized as entrepreneurs and innovators. So I must say that our members felt relieved and encouraged when they saw this kind of recognition. A lot of work strands, a lot of pathways that this vision opens to the future, looking to all directions, the economic, the environmental, the social, innovation as well, which is key for us. This is a key element in order to be successful in a balanced transition. But I must say that we are, despite of this shift in the way our sector is perceived, we are in a quite difficult moment in terms of the policy perspectives right now, because as we look ahead to the upcoming discussions on the future EU budget, we have a very high level of uncertainty when it comes to the destiny of the common agricultural policy, which is the main support tools for European farmers. So we hear a lot of scenarios. It's not only about the level of the funding of this policy, which is always a topic on the agenda when we talk about the overall EU budget. Why is that? Because it absorbs 1/3 of the EU budget overall. Yes, so this is always an issue, but this time we have to face an additional hurdle in these complicated discussions, because the Commission wishes to radically change the architecture of the EU budget. And there we might have scenarios on the table that pose a lot of risks when it comes to the commonality of the policy. So scenarios that would lead to a renationalization of the CAP toolbox. And this is something that our community strongly opposes, and that we see as contradictory with this shift in the perception of our sector. So on one hand, a strategic recognition, but on the other hand, a risk to undermine the main policy toolbox that we have in support of our sector. So this is the moment we are living in right now in terms of the policy context at EU level.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Still a lot to unpack there, Elli, but I think it's interesting, a couple of things that we have in common, and we're going to talk a bit more about this in a moment. The fact that innovation and economy are back in the spotlight, because that's the case here in Canada too. And let's talk about maybe some of the reasons why that may be the case in a moment. But I have a question for you around something you said as it relates to objectives versus process, because Canada and the EU, very different climates with respect to agriculture. And the vision note that the European Commission, the vision notes that the European Commission wants to align production standards for imports with EU standards, particularly on pesticides. And while acknowledging that European farmers are concerned about what is perceived to be increasingly unfair competition and a lack of reciprocity in trade, we understand this concern, but as a trading partner of the EU, we also know that policies and approaches that might work in the European Union are not always universally applicable. And Canada and the EU, to your point, share many of the same sustainability objectives. But we know that best practices in achieving these goals can vary due to regional differences in terms of the environment and production systems across jurisdictions. I see those differences even within Canada, just given the size of the country. Some of what we do in the West isn't done to the same extent in the East, and for good reason. And so one example before I get to my question would be the sustainable use of pesticides and biotech crops have been instrumental in enabling Canadian growers to adopt conservation tillage practices, for example, that have brought significant improvements in soil organic carbon over the last 30 years across the Canadian prairies. So my question to you is, how, in your view, can Canada and the EU work together to ensure that fair trade policies are in place while recognizing that there will be regional differences with respect to our food systems in the EU, in Canada, and in other jurisdictions?
This is a quite sensitive and complicated topic that has a lot of ramifications, but let me start from the more general level by saying that for us, it's a matter of coherence when it comes to the European Commission's agenda and policy ambitions on the internal level and the external trade agenda. So there we see that there is a lot of divergence. And this, you understand that it is quite sensible to for our farmers. So when you have this, I described a bit what was the ambiance during the farm to fork years and the Green Deal years, and all the abundance of regulations that stemmed from these kind of initiatives that put a lot of restrictions to our farmers. So it is a matter of coherence internally on how the European Commission works on the internal and external front, and it's also a matter of fair competition for us when it comes to the rules that we need to follow, but also to the tools that we have in order to be able to have a balanced, let's say, sustainability, both on an economic and environmental perspective. So, of course, it's not a matter of copy-pasting our rules to our trade partners, but it's being reassured that our trade partners work towards and they progress towards similar objectives, that we share the agendas and we do everything we can in order to implement these agendas. So it's a matter of seeing this balance. And it's a matter of us and our farmers having also the same tools to face the challenges. And this is not the case very often. So this is a bit the more strategic kind of reflection, but and I'm happy that you asked the question of what we can do together. Because the fact that we have our issues in the EU does not mean, and COPA-COGECA is very engaged and has strong bonds with our Canadian partners and with partners all across the world. We work together also in the WTO context. So we are fully committed both to the multilateral trade work that we can do together, and we have done many things so far, EU and Canada, but also to our bilateral collaboration and cooperation, I mean, flexibility and mutual recognition. There is a number of initiatives and methods of work. I mean, first of all, to enhance regulatory cooperation through dialogue and regular forums such as the EU-Canada Agricultural Dialogue and the CETA committees. So we are both very present there, and it's important to continue the work. To promote the mutual recognition of equivalency in food safety measures where scientific evidence supports comparable levels of protection. To promote transparency and inclusive trade impact assessments. I think that both sides we need to work towards this direction. To ensure transparent consultations with stakeholders, and especially the farmers' organizations, the cooperatives, but also consumer, that can inform better trade decisions. So we are the actors on the ground. So we need to be involved in these discussions if we want to trade to be meaningful for us. As I mentioned, the WTO work is fundamental. So leading proposals and work there is very important. And last but not least, knowledge exchange between sector actors, encouraging exchanges also between researchers, advisory services, our farmers' organizations. So these are a few ideas, totally feasible on how we can work together. As COPA and COGECA, on behalf of the EU, we are fully committed to this kind of partnership and work.
I'm thrilled to hear that. I love everything you said, and thank you very much for acknowledging some of the existing forums through which we can continue to advance those important directions, because I think that knowledge exchange is going to be very critical to better appreciate the European perspective and the Canadian perspective, and to your point, those shared goals. My colleague, Mac Ross, is thrilled to welcome a delegation from the EU in a couple of weeks, and they'll be here in the nation's capital and then touring some farms in Western Canada to facilitate that knowledge exchange, largely around those sustainability objectives and the practices that we employ here in Canada that help our farmers to meet those shared objectives. So let's continue to think about ways in which we can continue to do that and have those conversations, Elli, and know that we too are of the same view, that we are partners and allies, and look forward to that continued collaboration under your leadership. You mentioned consumers in your response, and I want to ask you a bit about some of the evolution of that ag policy conversation that's taken place over the last 5 years, and where and how consumers how they inform that discussion, because we face many of the similar challenges here in Canada. You know, we know that farmers in both countries and both regions rely on a wide array of safe and effective crop protection tools in order to be able to grow more with less, but we face those societal pressures regarding the use of these products from certain segments of our populations that may not have direct experience or knowledge of agriculture. And so, in your view, is there potential to work collaboratively to ensure that our farmers are not arbitrarily denied access to these important tools, promoting the adoption of a more science and evidence-based approach to the regulation of these tools?
This is a very good question and a key challenge for us, because we have our mission, for example, as COPA and COGECA, to advocate for the interests of our sector, but we also have a mission of enhancing understanding around our sector and around what farming is about, what are the needs of farmers, and facilitating this dialogue with other stakeholders. So that in the end, the policies that are implemented are pragmatic, and that they respect the economic operators that we are, that can have the possibility to deliver on the societal expectations if they have the right tools. So plant protection is is a quite complex and sensitive topic in the EU. So we follow, as I know that you follow, the precautionary principle, but the context in the EU is far more restrictive. We have lost in the last 20 years more than 400 substances in the EU. So what I keep hearing from our members is that they do not have the tools to work. They cannot work anymore, and the processes for the approval of new products, so they are not there. So they are left unarmed. And new solutions, like for example biocontrol, etc., we have an issue even there, because we have, for example, for a solution to be brought in the market, to wait for 5 until 7 years. So it is a very challenging context. We were in a very difficult situation in the previous mandate. We see that in the vision, there is a very important principle that is back: no ban without alternatives. So it is stated like that. So we are very happy to see this, and we hope that this will allow us to make the needs of our sector more understandable, and to have our farmers equipped with all the tools in order to continue in their profession, and to continue contributing to food security, because food security is currently, it's a global challenge, but it is a challenge that is recognized at EU level as part of the overarching objectives of this new mandate of the Commission, which looks a lot into the direction of security. So you cannot have this political objective on one side, and not allow the sector to work towards this objective. So a lot that we need to do, but we see an opening with a vision that we can work towards this direction. Then there are other types of solutions for which we hopefully see that we are getting closer, like new genomic techniques. So this is a policy file that is evolving. Currently, we are at the level of the trilogue, so which means that the two co-legislators have concluded their first reading, and now they are brought together with the European Commission in order to arrive to a final, hopefully, decision, and making available this very important tool for our farmers. So this is a key priority for COPA and COGECA. we have been for many years trying to make ourselves understand, both when it comes to the decision makers, but also to consumers, to other stakeholders, explaining, always using the science-based approach, what this means in practice and how it would be helpful for our farmers to tackle the very complex challenges of climate change and food security.
Are you feeling optimistic, Ellie, about the direction in which that policy is now moving? Do you think it's going to get to a place where it needs to go?
On NGTs, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, on NGTs.
Listen, we had a few weeks ago the breakthrough at the council level, where the file was blocked for quite a while. There are still some hurdles to overcome. So two main issues that are on the table right now, and that we will need to work on in order to have a final decision. So one is patentability, and the other one is the labeling, because the labeling is something that has been asked by the European Parliament. So they would like to have this on the label of the final product for NGT1 category. And you understand how this doesn't make sense at all, and it would block everything, and it would not be a clear and transparent way to inform the consumer, right? It would be misleading to the consumer. So adding complication. And then on the patentability, it was not supposed to be on the agenda, because in the initial proposal by the European Commission, it was supposed to be tackled at a later stage, but it came to the table in the council discussions. There we have a position as COPA and COGECA. We are not keen on patents, because we see their dependencies for our community. But even though we have this position, we keep pushing the co-legislators to arrive to a final balanced solution, because we want to have this tool in our toolbox. It is necessary. We cannot leave our farmers behind when it comes to taking advantage of this very important technology.
Agreed. Look forward to staying abreast of how that evolves in the coming weeks. And I appreciate what you said too, with respect to no ban without alternatives. It's an ongoing conversation between our farmers and policymakers too, around the availability of alternatives, both the cost and the efficacy of those alternatives. And that's when we have found that the farmer's perspective is so important, because you may have an alternative on paper, but it's important to have that dialogue with farmers to better appreciate the feasibility of those alternatives relative to what's been widely available.
Exactly.
Yeah, appreciate your perspective on that. Thanks very much for filling us in on what's happening with respect to the NGT regulations. That was on my list of questions for you. So now I want to pan out, if you will, a little and look at more of a global geopolitical perspective and the impact that what's happening around the world may be having on you and your members. I know we talked a moment ago about the evolution of ag policy in the EU, but I'm curious to know, to the extent shifting geopolitical policies are having on the direction of EU policy in recent months. And maybe, I can start with an example here in Canada, the influence, for example, of Robert F. Kennedy in his role now as the US Health Secretary. We're starting to see the very early signs of a renewed commitment from our government on science-based policies in Canada, and the importance of leading with science. And that's, I'm assuming, likely in response to some of the rhetoric that we're hearing and seeing south of the border. And now the ongoing threat of American tariffs has put the Canadian economy back in the spotlight after years of federal government neglect, and rightfully so. So these are obviously positive examples, which, if executed appropriately, and we're under a new government now, it's been about a week, if executed appropriately, will lead to good things for the Canadian economy and the agriculture industry in Canada. Are you seeing any similar reactions to what's happening around the world beyond your borders?
Yes, I mean it's a key moment, and I mean the whole EU. I mean, construction, the institutions are trying currently to put in place a strategy on how to tackle this new geopolitical era we are right now. For the EU. We are, and especially for the agri-food sector, we see a lot of potential, and I mean our positive trade balance is there to substantiate this. We see a lot of potential in engaging with trade partners around the globe. But there are a lot of challenges currently. So, and I don't see any positive impact at EU level at present. So we have the US, the tariffs, and the big unknown of what is going to happen. I mean, it changes every day. So a high level of uncertainty there, and this is a very important trade partner for us. Our businesses have invested for long in the US market, so we are quite fearful about this shift. But with the overall uncertainty and the domino effect that it will have overall on all of us, and especially when it comes to questioning the multilateral trade dimension, I mean the WTO role. This is something that we do not like. I mentioned before, I mean, our joint efforts in the WTO work, how important it is. We've shared the same objectives in terms of the reform, the dispute settlement instrument, I mean, other improvements that we can bring to reinforce this part. But the US has a clear view on this. We were there in Washington in mid-March together with our presidents. We engaged with the administration, with our partners there, the farming organizations. And what we heard on behalf of the administration is that we are shifting from an era of rules-based trade to an era of outcome-based trade. So nothing positive can come out of it. And then for us, Ukraine is also an issue. We have a war at the heart of the EU. Our sector faces significant challenges because as an outcome of the war and in support of Ukraine, and I need to say that our community also supported, I mean, in practical terms, especially the neighboring countries, our farming organizations, they provided concrete support to Ukrainian farmers with inputs, etc. So we share the cause, but the war triggered liberalization coming from Ukraine imports to the EU. So this puts significant pressure to our farmers. So an overall geopolitical context, which is very complex, very uncertain, and you know very well that uncertainty is the worst enemy of the farmer. Let me add also China to it. We had issues with China because of the electric vehicles case, EU and the Chinese. So they retaliated, even if they do not admit this, on our businesses with anti-dumping investigations that are very burdensome for our businesses. And you know how the market works. You don't need to implement the measures, the retaliation measures. The market operates on the feeling. So you already lose when there is a trade dispute. So we perceive this overall geopolitical context as very negative. The level of uncertainty the lack of recognition of the need to work together as global partners in a constructive way in a multilateral context. This is something that is fundamental for us, and when it is undermined, we cannot see any positive impact. And then on the EU agenda, of course, it makes the EU think about food security, of course, about the strategic autonomy, how we're going to reduce dependencies. So these are, of course, meaningful objectives. But if you are in a global context that makes you regress to your national or regional interests, it cannot be positive.
Agreed. And many of the examples that you've cited relative to the US and China, we're also experiencing here in Canada. So give me a moment. I'm going to circle back with my final question in a moment around what we can do together as allies on the global stage, given some of the challenges that we're both facing, Canada and the EU. Ending on a high note, though, I understand that this year, at the end of September, Italy is going to be hosting the North American European Union Agricultural Conference, which I had the pleasure of attending for the first time when it was hosted in Canada, Prince Edward Island, 2 years ago. I'm assuming you weren't there, were you? And I missed you?
Unfortunately not.
Okay, good. So you have attended in the past and you will be attending in Italy this year?
I have not attended in the past, but this year I am the host, so it will be a pleasure and an honor to be there and to welcome you all.
Oh, fantastic. We're so looking forward to going, as one does when you're going to visit Lake Como in Italy. But onto the policy now. Why is it important in your view that farmers from across Europe and North America come together every 2 years? And what do you expect the focus of this year's conversation is going to be in light of some of what is happening across those two regions?
Well, we all look forward in hosting this event from the European side, a high level of participation from our membership. This is a partnership and an event to which we are very committed. And it reflects our commitment to having strong bonds with our partners around the globe. Erin, you know this very well, the farming profession is a universal profession. So whichever part of the world we're coming from, a farmer is a farmer. And the challenges that we face now, I mean, they are global challenges. Food security is a global challenge. Climate change is a global challenge. The geopolitical context is affecting us all. So I think that this makes this kind of exchanges very meaningful. I always see when we engage with you, and we work very closely with the Canadian farmers, with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture as well. What I hear from my members is that they are at the same time reassured when they feel that they are not alone in this world, that their counterparts from other sides of the globe, they face the same challenges, they face the same issues, and they are also inspired every time by the best practices, by the solutions. So these are very meaningful exchanges. And I think that this year meeting, because of the current context, it makes this event even more meaningful. Of course, we are going to talk about our respective policies, but how they evolve in this current context and how they can evolve. And I think that we should, and I'm certain that all partners of the North American conference, that we look to the same direction, that we should come out of this meeting with a very strong message of unity of our global community. Farmers, talking to farmers, independently of the current geopolitical tension and maintaining the strong bonds and the dialogue, this is a message that we need to convey together to decision makers, all sides. Because if they are not able to find a solution, and if they are not able to sit on the table to discuss, we are able to do it. And this is a very strong message. The context is as strong as the content in this moment. So that's why I really personally, and we all look forward to this meeting in end of September, beginning of October.
See, you're leaving this conversation now. You've got me feeling very inspired about the potential because I couldn't agree more. When Canada was facing, I think it was the second round of tariffs from the Trump administration, not that long ago. Our governments obviously were not aligned on those policies and priorities, but we as a sector, when we went to Washington, to your point, to meet with our American counterparts, we continue to be aligned on all of these issues. And so I think having the opportunity to come together and reinforce that alignment sends a very powerful message.
Same on our side. We met all the U.S. Farming organization, and when we came back to the EU and we engaged with the EU institutions, we told them that for us as farming community, staying close, exchanging, this is something that we continue to do, and we want you to do the same.
That's so powerful. Thank you. I want to circle back. I have a personal interest in leadership, Elli, having studied the topic as part of my graduate degree. And I think that increasingly the unprecedented challenges that you have outlined require unprecedented leadership. And so I want to close all of my conversations by asking my guests to weigh in on the topic. And my question for you is this. Reflecting on some of the global geopolitical shifts that you have outlined throughout our conversation this morning, I'm speaking more specifically perhaps to the United States, and what I sense is a potential move away, not only from science-based policies, but you talked about it, from the multilateral forums, to which I think historically have largely guided policymaking in the US. We're seeing increasing disengagement from them in those multilateral forums. What impact does that have on Canada in the EU? And how does our role change as a result? Is there an increased opportunity for alignment and leadership from Canada in the EU in those forums? And if so, what does that look like in your view?
Listen, it has a domino effect on all of us, on the trade flows, first of all. And this is, I think this is something that puzzles us, both sides. What will be the impact? I mean, on our side, we are asking on behalf of the European Commission to help us with an assessment of what would be the effect of all this shift. And it's not an easy equation to solve, but a big unknown there. Erin, I think I need to go back to what I said before. Yes, this is an opportunity for leadership. Canada and the EU, they are, how can I say, progressive, democratic forces that have been working together for long, constructively. I can feel it with the context that we have at the level of farming organizations. So this is a moment where the forces in the global sphere that have this collective view and that can understand the globality of the challenges and the potential of collaboration, they need to take the lead and to, how can I say, impose this collaborative agenda as much as they can. I mean, this is what we ask the European Commission to do. Don't disengage for diplomacy. This is the ask of our organizations. Keep open the dialogue. Keep the dialogue open. This is very important. And our work is to influence decision makers, is to stay close to decision makers. and to bring and to convey this strong message, and to act by example. So by taking initiatives together and showing and making these initiatives visible to our decision makers, so that they are inspired by our work and they take example. Many times, I'm sure you notice it in your advocacy work. Decision makers, they need good examples, good practices. I mean, we could act as a good practice in terms of taking the lead and keeping the dialogue and the cooperation open in our bilateral work, but also within the bodies on which we consistently work together. So bilaterally, but also insisting of keeping together all the structures that we have multilaterally or at the level of our countries to work together. I mean, the institutional ones and bilateral ones. We need to keep it there and to influence decision makers to this direction. So I do believe that the farming world is very strong. It is listened by decision makers. It is a very powerful community, and it can lead by example. I think this is the moment to do it.
I think that's just brilliant. That gives us, I think, some sense of power and ownership over some of these issues, which feel largely out of our control, Elli. So I think that is a perfect message on which to end this very inspiring conversation, is to take a call to action to lead by example. So we appreciate your leadership and all the work that you and your members do to do just that in the EU. And we look forward to seeing how you continue to do that as the new Secretary General. Thank you very much for joining me for today's conversation.
Thank you, Erin. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed.
Thank you. And thank you for your time and your perspective. I hope that you, our listeners, found this episode as thought-provoking and inspiring as I did. Remember that these fireside chats with Erin are monthly, so mark your calendars. We will be back next month with another great conversation. Stay connected with us for more engaging conversations that delve into the heart of the grain industry, and you can catch us on your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. Just search for Fireside Chats with Erin and hit the subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. Until next time.